Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to the Student Research Seminar Series 2021. My name is Devyani and I will be the host for the evening. This event aims to showcase the research done at IISc publicly. This is a monthly event, and today we have two very interesting talks lined up for you all by the students of EC department. Uh, Before we begin, for the records, I would like to know how many of you are IEEE members. So I would request all the IEEE members to raise your hand so that we can get a count. Okay, thank you. Please unraise yourself. We'll get to the talk. So without further ado, we'll begin the first talk, which is photonic quantum error correction using double state encoding by Rohit K. Ramakrishnan. Rohit is a PhD scholar in Applied Photonics Lab, Department of Electrical Communication Engineering, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He is working on photonic quantum computing with Professor T. Srinivas. He has done his BTech in Electronics and Communication Engineering from College of Engineering Trivandrum, Kerala, and Masters in Photonics from International School of Photonics, QSET. He was previously research assistant at Center for Quantum Technologies, National University of Singapore, where he worked in the Quantum Satellite Project. Prior to that, he had worked in Quantum Optics Research Group in Australian Defence Force Academy as postgraduate researcher. He has co-developed quantum homodyne tomographic code for photon detection in Australia. He is one of the co-authors of the book Quantum Internet, The Second Quantum Revolution, to be released by Cambridge University Press later this year. Welcome, Rohit, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Devyani. So,
Yeah.
good evening, everyone. So, I hope I'll try to present my screen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. I think I'll switch off the video for the timing. So, the bandwidth is
Yeah,
not.
sure.
So, good evening, everyone. So, I'm Rohit from Applied Photonics Lab. So, today I'll be presenting the latest work from our lab, which we are doing in photonic quantum error correction. So, this will be the agenda of the talk. We'll start with an introduction, go to some basics, the background of the work, and the protocol we developed. We'll share the theoretical results and the experiment which is currently ongoing, and we'll have a brief idea about our future work. So, I guess almost everyone in the audience are familiar with the term quantum communication and quantum computation. Like, there has been a consensus right now that this is the future of the technology. And this is where quantum physics comes into play in information processing, which actually offers us a new paradigm. But even though the promises are huge, and though it appears like there's a magic technology which is going to change what we are doing right now, there are a lot of challenges which the field comes along with the field. One is, even we have successfully demonstrated quantum communication in labs, and also from Earth to satellite, and also in many real-world scenarios. But to replace the existing communication infrastructure or to complement on that, we need to be compatible in terms of data rate, and also we have to take care of errors. Now, when you talk about quantum processing, when your quantum physics comes into play, it brings along with it a new set of errors like quantum errors. So we need new error correction techniques and better methods to increase the data rate. So these are the two challenges we are trying to address in the current scenario. So these are like introductory part. I think most people are familiar with it. I'm not going to spend much time on this. We'll just skim through it. So I think all of you know what is a qubit is. It's a quantum version of a classical bit where 0 becomes Dirac 0, 1 becomes Dirac 1. And unlike a classical bit, a qubit can be in a quantum superposition. It can be 0 and 1 at the same time. The expression is given by phi is equal to alpha 0 plus beta 1. If you measure the qubit, you get a 0 with a probability of alpha square. If you measure, again, you get a 1 with a probability of beta square. Obviously, alpha square plus beta square equals 1, because we had to get either one of the values. Now, there is a mathematical expression for the qubit, which allows us to visualize the qubit in the shape of a sphere. We call it Bloch sphere. And in the Bloch sphere representation given, if the vector is pointing upwards, it points to 0. If when it's pointing downwards, it points to 1. So this is just a visualization tool and has actually nothing to do with an actual qubit. Now, these are like, qubit is a mathematical construct, like an abstract mathematical construct. So there is no limitation that you have to stick with the binary logic. We can actually map it to higher level logics, or like instead of 2, we can go up to D level systems. So that's where the new term comes in. We call it QDIT, where it stands for D level systems or high dimensional logic. Now, why do we need a high dimensional system? Suppose we have a QDIT of D equal to 4. Essentially, it can encode 4 times the quantum information, which can be encoded into a qubit. As the D increases, the information capacity increases exponentially, which means theoretically, a qubit can actually hold much more quantum information than a single qubit. So this is actually a possible solution for low data rate, at least in theory. We are still yet to develop essential models of qubits or higher dimensional qubits in the lab to do the field testing. And there is no visual representation of a qubit. Unlike qubit, you cannot visualize a qubit using any sphere or anything like that. So, and one more basic concept which we will require to explain what we are doing is quantum entanglement. I think this term is again familiar with the paper, because entanglement is like 2 people tossing a coin at 2 different locations. The outcome will be completely random, but it's the same outcome. Outcome will be correlated in both locations. Like if one of them gets tailed, the other should get according to the entanglement happening. Technically, it is non-local correlations exhibited by a set of quantum objects. And you cannot express them as a product of 2 states. You have to write a single expression. That's how you know it's a quantum entanglement or not. So here we are given the Bell states, which actually is a maximally entangled state, example of maximally entangled states. Now, coming to the background. So here, when we realize a quantum communication link or even a quantum memory, the biggest challenge for us is the quantum state which we encode changes its states over time, like decoherence occurs. And the major source of errors is what we call as phase errors. This can happen due to thermal fluctuations or other environmental reactions or something like that. So in a paper, passive quantum error correction of linear optics network through error averaging, it was shown that given multiple copies of a linear optical unitary network, error averaging can be used to implement a transformation that tends towards the average with reduced variance at the cost of the probability of success. Expression is given here. And this was the inspiration to start what we were doing. To explain more on that, later a paper came telling that 3 qubits. This is a special case of what we have been telling. If you take a case of 3 qubits, they can be entangled in 2 inequivalent ways. One is GHZ state, which is also known as Greenberger-Horn-Zellinger state, and another state known as W state. Now, GHZ state is a very well-known state and very well-known studied state. It is used a lot in error correction protocols. And the problem with the GHZ state is it is not the entangled state. I mean, the entanglement is not that robust against the loss. Meanwhile, the W state, it is not much used in error correction. I mean, actually, till date, there has not been much interest in realizing or using the state called W state. But we found that the entanglement is robust in a W state against the loss. So the idea is like, if you take a partial trace, to prove the robustness point, like if you take a partial trace of a GHZ state, the problem is that once you calculate the partial trace, it loses its entanglement. But if you take the partial trace on a W state, what happens is that it can lose entanglement, but the possibility is given by n minus 1 by m, which means it preserves the entangled state, and as much bigger the W state is, the entanglement is more and more preserved. So bigger the W state, you preserve the entanglement, even when you do partial trace operations. Partial trace operations is done to know the quantum state without measuring it. So this is where we found that W state is more advantageous over GHZ states. And just like I told, the robustness actually increases with the size of the W state. The more bigger the W state, the more it preserves the entanglement. So let us consider a W state in a W basis. Let us say take a case of 4, and we can take up to n. For the sake of clarity, we just took 4. So if we expand a W state in a W basis, the coefficients actually give us this particular expression. W is equal to Qi. So when you look at the Qi, I mean the coefficients, we find that it is nothing but a quantum Fourier transform. So which means that to make a W state, you don't have to do anything, but just take the quantum state and pass it through a quantum Fourier transform. This is it's a direct result from expanding the W state in a W basis. So we have talked about 2 points. W state preserves its entanglement, and we can make a state W state by just doing a quantum Fourier transform. Now, keeping that aside, let us talk about encoding a qubit. So here we use a method known as dual rail encoding. In dual rail encoding, there are 2 paths, and if the qubit appears, the qubit appears on first path, we call it 0. It appears on second, we call it 1. Now, when you try to realize this using a photon, it's quite easy to do it with a beam splitter, where you get 0 in the first. You pass a photon through a beam splitter. There is a finite probability that the photon will appear on either one of the 2 paths. And depending upon how you work on the beam splitter, we can actually adjust the value of alpha and beta. So this is the path, this method we use to encode the photons when we implement the qubit protocol. So that is the first part of our protocol. Excuse me. Just take. So that is our qubit protocol. We first encode the incoming qubit into a logical qubit by passing it through a beam splitter, and this is fed through a quantum Fourier transform. Now, after the quantum Fourier transform, we introduce phase errors, or we introduce the random phase errors, which are independent phase errors. Now, we take the inverse Fourier transform. Then we have fed the photon, or fed the qubit into the first 2 lines. Like as you can see from the diagram, the logical qubit is first 2 lines, 0 and 1. The rest are like ancilla photons, or the auxiliary lines, or redundant lines. So if the due to the phase added, if the photon appears, and after the inverse Fourier transform, if the photon appears in the first 2 lines itself, like 0 and 1, that means the protocol is a success. Error has not affected it. But if the photon appears, if the phase errors force the photon to appear in the lines from 2 to d-1, 2 to n-1, we call the protocol a failure. That means an error has occurred, or the phase error which we introduce has corrupted the photon state. So after the quantum Fourier transform, what we actually get is an essentially W state. So this W state is added, these phase errors are added to the W states, and this density matrix is passed through the inverse quantum Fourier transform to recover the input. Now, this is for qubits, and we expanded the protocol for qubits again. So now what we have is, instead of, now we have to get rid of the idea of beam splitter, but because we have to encode into D level systems. So first D lines, 0 to d-1, are our logical qubits. So we encode the photon into the logical qubits, and then we pass it to the quantum Fourier transform. The output is a W state, and again we introduce phase errors into it. So after adding the phase errors, we feed it to the inverse Fourier transform. And now we check for the success. If the photons, the logical photons, are present in the same 0 to d-1 modes, we call it the protocol a success. That is, the phase errors which we have added has not corrupted the photons. But if they appear in the failure nodes, that is d to n-1, we call the protocol a failure, which means error has occurred, or the phase has actually corrupted the photon. So the average state is given by the density matrix. Since it is an error averaging, we can calculate lambda W plus 1 minus lambda, where lambda is a dephasing parameter, and 1 minus lambda into delta. That is, this lambda and 1 minus lambda, they actually cause the error. And this delta is a dephasing operator. This is the expression for the average state. The mathematical proof and the derivation can be found in the papers which attached earlier. Now, the question is, you send the photons, add errors, and detect it. Now, how do we do the detecting? You can either check the success lines. I mean, the line in the case 0 to d minus 1, or you can check the failure lines, d to n minus 1. So we know that if you measure a quantum state, the quantum state is destroyed, or like the quantum information is lost, it collapses. So there are two methods to do this. That is absent surrounding and present surrounding. In present surrounding, we check for success lines. We check if the photon is present in the success lines, that is 0 to d minus 1. In absent surrounding, we check the failure lines, 1 to ph minus a, that is d to n minus 1. The advantage is, in absent surrounding, we perform negative measurements on failure modes. That is, when you check the failure modes, you don't want the photon to be there. If the photon is there, that means errors are there. But advantage is, it preserves the quantum information in success modes, because we are checking only the failure modes. We are not touching the success mode, which means quantum information in the failure mode might collapse. But again, the quantum information in success mode is preserved. So loss in success mode will be positive. But if you do present surrounding, we measure the success modes. But in that case, the success in quantum information is destroyed. We can do this if we have no further use of that quantum information. But if you want to carry on that quantum information to the network or to another quantum node, we need to preserve the quantum information. So here, we choose the post-selection method of absent surrounding. Now talking about fidelity, we add like unitary phase errors. So before adding phase errors and after the phase errors, we check for the fidelity and we find it is unitarily invariant. Now we know that quantum Fourier transform is a unitary operator. So which means the fidelity has to be preserved throughout the entire protocol. We will prove it mathematically. The proof is given in the paper. And the theoretical results which we obtained, we have presented in a Clio Pacific Rim Sydney conference in 2020 August. Now, talking about the results, these are the heralding probability and fidelity. I mean, these are the two results which we actually have. So you do the measurement on absent states. So the heralding probability is given by the expression PHA eta plus 1 minus eta, lambda plus 2 by n, 1 minus lambda. This is for qubits. And eta is the loss model parameter. And 2 by n is the error state contribution. Now, fidelity on success, that is for the logical qubit, L is given by FHA, 1 minus lambda, given by the expression. Now, we took this a bit further towards calculating the heralding probability or the absence heralding probability of the D-level systems, which gives us eta plus 1 minus eta, lambda plus now 2 by n changes into d by n. The entire derivation is given in the paper. And the fidelity of success, again, that's a very complicated expansion, which we are not bothered right now at the moment. It is in the paper. So we calculated the error probabilities against the loss model parameters, so which gave us the results for different systems. I mean, different D-level systems. When d equal to 3, and d equal to 4, and d equal to 5. So observation was basically these are independent. Like the more you vary the d, the error doesn't actually increase. I mean, doesn't changes that level to which, or in other words, the protocol is much more robust when you increase the D-level systems. So the next step was to verify this with an experiment. So we collaborated with the Quantum Science and Technology Group in Physical Research Laboratory, Ahmedabad. And initially the idea was to implement the qubit protocol because it appeared to be much more simple than a D-level system. Because realizing D-level systems in lab is much more complex because you have to have a photon in say if you selected D is equal to 4 or 5, you need a system where you can represent photon in 4 different states. Like when you choose a D equal to 2, it is very straightforward. You can just choose a photon in a polarization mode. But there, if you go for D level, you require different techniques. So initially the idea was to use beam splitters and other things using polarized photons to verify the protocol. But later, the experiment was on hold because of the pandemic. And there was another team, another foreign team from China who actually wanted to do the experiment because the paper was already published. But we told them like, we have already started the experiment, and so they backed off. So our next step was to verify how to verify qubit and qubit in a single experiment. And the guys from PRL came with an idea of using spatial light modulators instead of polarizing beam splitters. So in this method, actually what we tried to do was encode the quantum information into the orbital angular momentum of a photon, which can be done by the spatial light modulators. So when you encode quantum information into orbital angular momentum, there is no limitation for like the higher level states. Theoretically, we can actually do in one single experiment, we can verify qubit as well as qubit protocols. All we had to do is take the values and then verify them against the theoretical results which we have obtained. Of course, the experiment setup is quite complicated and the experiment is ongoing right now. It has been stuck a couple of times due to the pandemic. So there is a schematic of the experiment. We use spatial light modulators to first to do the phase flattening. And again, the same spatial light modulators will be used to randomize errors. I mean, to introduce random phase errors. Using another one, we do the quantum Fourier transform and the inverse quantum Fourier transform. And then by using photon detectors, we take it from single mode fibers and do the constants count to get the check the values. Since the experiment is ongoing, I'm not in a liberty to disclose more details about it, like how we do orbital angular momentum and how we do the SLMs and what is the method behind it. That we will be, after finishing the experiment, we'll be publishing it. So before that, I am not in liberty to disclose these things. So that is just a view of the experiment setup, which we started. I mean, the experiment actually started somewhere in November and still ongoing. So the advantage of the method is it is easy to implement. We don't have to introduce much complicated states. We don't have to introduce much complicated states like converting a photon or logical qubit into encoded qubit is a straightforward operation by just implementing a QFT. And like to error correct, like we can do this in the presence of noise. Like you don't have to isolate between the noise. Most of the noise which we try to overcome, we try to address is the thermal fluctuations and the noise occurring from environment and the surroundings. So we don't need to isolate from the noise and do the error correction. We can do it on the go. And it is scalable. Like as you have seen in the theoretical results, when the W state size increases, the entanglement is more and more preserved. So it is basically scalable. So any independent, uncorrelated phase errors can be corrected. That's the advantage of it. Now disadvantage is, in case if the errors are correlated, we still have a problem in correcting it. Actually, we are trying to address this theoretical problem by modifying the protocol, but still we feel that there's a problem that we cannot correct the correlated fluctuations. And obviously, any error correction technique will increase production costs and it will increase resource overhead. And that will be determined by the degree of redundancy. So now, the future work is, we are trying to extend the work into multi-qubit and multi-qubit scenarios. So right now, what we have seen is we just take one logical qubit or one logical qubit and do the encoding and add errors and do the error correction protocol. But this single qubit or qubit error correction is applicable on scenarios like quantum communication, where you send quantum information over an optical fiber or even free space, whatever. And also to be used in quantum memories. Actually, this protocol was much more developed by keeping quantum memories as a focus, because in quantum memories, you have to preserve the quantum state for a longer time. And that's when exactly where the fluctuations happen, or the dephasing noise comes into picture, the thermal fluctuations, other things comes into picture and corrupt the memory. So this particular protocol will be more useful for quantum communication as well as quantum memories. But if we can take the protocol into a further level, where we can take multiple quantum qubits or multiple qubits, now we can error correct the whole thing against an entire quantum computation scheme. That is, for an entire quantum computer, you can use the whole error correction scheme, but that requires a little bit more development of theory, and currently we're working on it, and we have made progress. Now the experiment is currently ongoing. It has been suspended a couple of times because of the pandemic and issues, but still now it is back and getting back on track. Not completely, but still getting back on track. So so far the results looks promising. So the PRL team actually wants to do the field testing. Like once the experiment is successful in the lab, they're planning to they have the plan to take it outside, like do the field testing in the real world conditions. And if the second level of that testing is all successful, there's a quantum. We all know that India is building a quantum satellite in which PRL, ISRO, everyone are collaborating. So maybe in the future versions of quantum satellite, we may be able to use the protocol for quantum communication. And then once we develop the, as I said earlier, once we develop the multi-qubit scenarios or multi-qubit scenarios, yet we will require an experimental validation of that scheme also. And that experiment is going to be much more complicated, and much more complex in terms of resources. So we'll have to think about that. So these are our future works which we have planned. So to introduce the team, the research started under the guidance of Professor T. Srinivas and our collaborator, Dr. Gopal Hegde, both are from IISc. And my teammate, Mr. Aravind Balaji Ravichandran, is a theorist in our group. And the whole idea started with a discussion with a close friend, Dr. Peter Rodi, who's a faculty in University of Technology, Sydney. And the work basically started with Peter and his colleague, his previous colleague, Dr. Austin Pilland, who is currently in University of Queensland, Australia. And the qubit protocol was developed by Peter's student, Madhav Krishnan, who actually successfully defended his PhD recently. So we together developed the protocol for the qubits, and the experiment was finally done in the Professor R.P. Singh's lab in Physical Research Laboratory, Ahmedabad. And Dr. Nijal is a collaborator there, and he was, with Nijal, we actually developed the experimental schematic with the help of Dr. Anindya Banerjee, who was a theorist in a Physical Research Laboratory and who has recently moved to Center for Quantum Technologies in Singapore. And Sarika Mishra is an experimental physicist in Physical Research Laboratory, Ahmedabad. And she and Nijal are currently in charge of the experiment, and Sarika is right now taking the experiment forward. So that's our team. And before closing, one more thing. Peter, a book is coming out called Quantum Internet, the Second Quantum Revolution, which will be released by Cambridge University Press later this year. And all the work which we have done so forward, and furthermore details will be included in the book. And we have made a deal with the Cambridge University that the e-copy of the book is going to be free. So once the book is released, the website will be up. So it'll be free to download. Feel free to download and give us the feedback. I think I am in the limits of the time. So thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Rohit, for the talk. We are open to questions. Are there any questions? Please go ahead and ask. Okay, so Rohit, can you stop sharing now, please?
Yeah.
I need to share.
No, because if somebody wants to see a slides, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Let's stop it. So I think the topic was a bit high level. I guess people who are not much familiar with the background may not be able to, doubtful how much they want to grasp it.
Yeah.
Because it is mostly mathematical. So there are two papers which I have mentioned in the slides. So you can actually download the papers and go through it and contact us in case you have any doubts. Because I just presented the results. I haven't given the derivation or the proof or anything like that. So that you can find in the paper.
Yeah.
So mostly it is mathematical. So I don't think people may have too much to ask once you just present the result without the proof and everything.
Okay, so I would request Rohit to write his email ID in the chat box if anybody wants to contact him.
You can contact my IAS email ID itself, but
Yeah.
the email ID.
Sure. Okay, so thank you, Rohit.
Thank you very
for-
much.
And please accept this memento on behalf of IEEE IAC Community Society and Signal Processing Society
Okay,
for
thank
the
you very
talk.
much. Is that
Yeah,
virtual or is it real?
virtual.
Thank you.
And we wish you all the best for your future endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.